So the first rule in business is you must add value to society in some way. Old school is just make a profit, who cares if it adds value? New school is predominantly social mission. What is your social mission for your company? You see where this all starts? You should be going out in the world saying, how can I change the world and make it a better place?
Jamie McIntyre, while in his mid-20s, found himself in an unenviable position. He was completely broke, in debt to the tune of $150,000, with no job, no prospects, and sleeping on a friend's couch. He had arrived at this point in his life by working hard, long hours in a business he had built from the ground up. He thought he was doing everything right, everything that he had been taught by his parents and teachers that he needed to do to be successful in life. Yet here he was, broke. The business he had built was in tatters. At this point, Jamie decided there simply must be an easier way. There must be something he had done wrong or something he was missing that the wealthy and successful knew. He began to study any successful people he could get access to try and work out exactly what it is that makes them this way and how he could replicate that success in his own life. Jamie came to realise that there is no big secret, but there are some common strategies and a certain way of thinking that aren't taught in the outdated education system that is currently available at schools and universities. And it's these key strategies that mean the difference between the average person working a 40-hour week to make a modest salary and those elite few who achieve financial abundance and live the lifestyle that most people dream of. Within less than 5 years, Jamie had rebuilt his life using the strategies he had discovered. He had gone from flat broke to a self-made millionaire while still in his 20s and was even nominated for Young Australian of the Year in 1999 for his achievements. Since then, Jamie has made it his life's work to share the strategies he used to get him out of debt and generate massive wealth. He decided the world needed a modern-day 21st century education system, taught by those with a PhD in results, not just theory, an education for life. So he founded a company to do exactly that. Over the past 12 years, 21st century education has educated over 450,000 people worldwide.
What do millionaires do differently? How do they think differently? How do they produce a different result when they have the same opportunity, live in the same economy? Why do some people outperform?
One of his books, What I Didn't Learn at School But Wish I Had, has become a bestseller. And he has now written many other titles on the various strategies he has used to get where he is today. Founder of over a dozen companies that turn over $40 million annually and employ up to 100 staff, Jamie has also been guest speaker at numerous events and programs, including the Sky News business channel's Your Money, Your Call program and the Financial Education Summit, where he shared the stage with some of the world's leading entrepreneurs, including Sir Richard Branson, Tim Ferriss, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Mark Bouris, Eddie Maguire, Danny Green, Ruslan Kogan, and Randy Zuckerberg. Jamie also has significant agricultural interests, owning rural farms in the New England region of New South Wales near Glen Innes. Jamie is also the founder of the 21st Century Australia Party and movement, which is also fielding Senate seats. He is a federal candidate for the seat of New England against Tony Windsor and Barnaby Joyce. His passion is now to teach as many people as possible the various trading, property, business and mindset techniques used by some of the world's wealthiest people. Thousands of people have already benefited from these courses and are now living a better life, with more money, more time and less stress than they were before.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. Bitcoin, it's an exciting topic. I first heard of Bitcoin obviously a few years ago. I know some of you have only recently heard of it. Most of the world's only heard of Bitcoin in probably the last 6 weeks. A lot of the world is still yet to hear about Bitcoin, which is important when we talk about today. Today is really one to help you find out what the hell is Bitcoin. Is it a potential investment strategy for some of you that you might want to profit from? And how, if that's the case, do you take advantage of it? How else can you profit from Bitcoin if you don't want to trade it? The other ways you can make money from Bitcoin. But also, is it a digital revolution? Is it a new currency? Is it the basis of a new monetary system? Has the potential to change the world? When we look at all those things, because all those factors will come into play for you to be able to assess, does Bitcoin have part of your future in some way? Or for some of you, you just may be curious, like many people on the planet right now, just really wanted to see what this is about, how that may affect your life in a small or large way. I first started writing a book about Bitcoin a little over a year ago. It was probably almost 18 months ago. And I put it on the back burner because I thought, people, I start talking about Bitcoin back then, people were like, what is Jamie talking about? It's not his normal topic that he would write on. But the reason I became interested in Bitcoin was because those who are familiar with my first book, What I Didn't Learn at School But Wish I Had, which became a bestseller over 10 years ago, if you recall in that book, I do a chapter on the history of money, and I've talked about the history of money, the Federal Reserve, the central banking system, and how the monetary system's in the hands of a few small number of people, and private bankers basically, and how this has led to having what some would say is a non-transparent and debt-based monetary system that we saw, or in that book I talked about within the end of the decade, I and many others predicted there would be a financial crash of epic proportions because the monetary system's heavily debt-based, fractional reserve system is not sustainable in the way that it is, and really the monetary system should be controlled and administered by governments that are accountable to the people, as you and I, not in the hands of private bankers that dictate to the governments in many cases how things happen on the planet. So as we saw, we fast forwarded, before the end of the decade we did see a crash. Is that true? By 2008, Lehman Brothers, when it imploded as a bank, it really triggered a global financial crisis that with the whole financial system was a matter of a few short hours away from completely imploding. And I guess a lot of people on the planet don't realize how close it come to D-Day, where we could have had one of the worst depressions we certainly would have ever witnessed. It was only hours away from that happening. And why is that important? Because certain people decide, instead of just complaining about that or doing nothing about it, when there's a problem, then there's also a potential solution. So an individual developer or a group of developers, it's unknown who exactly, decided that the banks and central banks were too irresponsible to be let control the monopoly of the issuance of money in the world, and therefore they decided to create a thing called Bitcoin, which was then launched in 2009, and it came out of the agenda to remove the power of the creation of money from private central bankers and put it into a free open source system that would be available for the world to use, that's honest and transparent, and no central body, no central bank is controlling it. And that's how Bitcoin was born. And so those who, if you read in the media these days, and especially the last 6 weeks as it's become mainstream media, you'll read about all sorts of opinions on Bitcoin. Some journalists will say it's a tulip bubble, a tulip mania, the Bitcoin is a bubble, and you'll hear a lot of other, I would say in many cases, ignorant responses. Because first of all, what would journalists know about a potential revolution in the world's monetary system? Very little in most cases. They'd have to admit themselves they're not researched on it. Anyone to call it a tulip mania usually is they're espousing their ignorance of a digital revolution. And I'll talk about that and what my opinions are. But when I read articles by mainstream media, I'm really looking to see what is the evidence supporting their theory or their statement. And if they have some good backup evidence, then that would make sense. We'll listen to their case. Today, I guess I'm going to share my views, and then we'll look at the evidence of why I think the way that I do and see the opportunity in Bitcoin. And then it's ultimately up to you, taking in different information, different sources, how you see the future of Bitcoin, and is it an opportunity, and how can you profit from that potentially if that's your goal. Before we get into that, let's take a quick look at a couple of videos. Rather than me tell you what Bitcoin is, let's just quickly see what Bitcoin is, and then I'll share with you in detail my views on it.
What is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is the first decentralized digital currency. Bitcoins are digital coins you can send through the internet. Compared to other alternatives, Bitcoins have a number of advantages. Bitcoins are transferred directly from person to person via the net, without going through a bank or clearinghouse. This means that the fees are much lower, you can use them in every country, your account cannot be frozen, and there are no prerequisites or arbitrary limits. Let's look at how it works. Bitcoins are generated all over the internet by anybody running a free application called a Bitcoin miner. Mining requires a certain amount of work for each block of coins. This amount is automatically adjusted by the network such that Bitcoins are always created at a predictable and limited rate. Your Bitcoins are stored in your digital wallet, which might look familiar if you use online banking. When you transfer Bitcoins, an electronic signature is added. After a few minutes, the transaction is verified by a miner and permanently and anonymously stored in the network. The Bitcoin software is completely open source and anybody can review the code. Bitcoin is changing finance the same way the web changed publishing. When everyone has access to a global market, great ideas flourish. Let's look at some examples of how Bitcoins are already used today. You can purchase video games, gifts, books, servers, and alpaca socks. Several currency exchanges exist where you can trade your Bitcoins for dollars, euros, and more. Bitcoins are a great way for small businesses and freelancers to get noticed. It doesn't cost anything to start accepting them, there are no chargebacks or fees, and you'll get additional business from the Bitcoin economy. For your first Bitcoins and more information, visit weusecoins.com.
So there you have it. A little bit of idea of what Bitcoin is. We'll go in and explore that in a little bit more detail. So I guess it's important when we're looking at any new opportunity to keep an open mind and to be able to take advantage of that. And because if we look at some of the realities of Bitcoin, for those who don't know, in 2009 you could mine. The only way to get Bitcoin, if you're not familiar with it, you want to jot this down, is there's a limited amount of Bitcoin that will ever be available. There can only be ever amount of 21 million Bitcoins. At this point in time, there's about 12 million have been mined. So in the beginning, the only way you could have got your hands on Bitcoin was to mine it. Now, you don't go out and dig in the ground like you do to mine precious metals like gold. How you would mine it is through free software that you could run on your computer. And that would basically be working constantly to break an algorithm, and then when you break the logarithm, you reward it with a Bitcoin. It's designed that way to make it similar to gold as far as a scarce resource, and that can hold its potential value. So there can only ever be 21 million Bitcoins mined, and at this point we're at 12 million that have been mined. So let's jot this down quickly. As far as how do you get your hands on Bitcoin, one is to mine it. Now, I'm sure if you tell your friends I'm going to become a Bitcoin miner, they'll probably have no idea what you're talking about. But if you talk to the younger generation, a lot of teenagers and kids, they'll say, yeah, we mined some Bitcoin years ago. Now you're probably going to throttle them for selling them, okay, years ago when they were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cents. But kids were happy if they mined something that cost them nothing other than their parents' electricity, and then they were able to sell them for 10 or 20 cents. For them, they've done a good deal. Little did they know that if they had held on to them, Bitcoin hit $1,250, actually went past the value of gold a few short weeks ago. From something that they could have mined pretty much for nothing. And this is why you hear the extraordinary stories of people that become Bitcoin millionaires. As of when I released my book 3 or 4 months ago on Bitcoin, at that point there was around about 250 Bitcoin millionaires. Since then, though, we've seen a rapid surge in the price of Bitcoin, and we estimate to be well over 1,000 Bitcoin millionaires on the planet already, and we already have seen our first Bitcoin billionaire. The gentleman or the anonymous individual or group of people behind Bitcoin is Satoshi Nakamoto. Now that's, no one knows the identity of who this person is, or is it an individual, is it a group of developers, or this conspiracy theories, it's the CIA or FBI behind it. You'll hear that on anything. But the reality is people with libertarian viewpoints, and there's many of those people on the planet, that really want to see a more honest, transparent monetary system. That's what I believe is the real agenda behind it. That's been its stated agenda. And you could look at it as saying it's a disruptive technology. What you've seen with, say, Facebook and Google and these all these apps that have been coming out, they are disruptive technologies that disrupt an industry. And what you see in the monetary and the banking industry is you have an industry that charges a lot of money, has a lot of power, makes a lot of profit, and often doesn't deliver the best services to people. So any industry is open to be disrupted by technology. And digital currency has the ability and is disrupting the current banking system. Just as PayPal has started to lead that way, etc., moving in different payment systems outside the traditional banking system. And the banks are well aware that their monopoly of the market could erode, where they can charge you fees for anything you purchase, etc. The thing with Bitcoin is that merchants can use it and it's zero fees. So that's when you say, what's one of the intrinsic values, and what's one of the key benefits of Bitcoin? One of them is mentioned on that video, is that merchants can trade in Bitcoin and they're paying no fees. Some people can liken it to barter. But the difference with Bitcoin is that you can barter it and you can use it to, so we can mine it, jot this down, 2, we can buy it. Okay, and you can now buy it, and we'll talk about that. You buy it through exchanges. Or 3, you can accept it. So if you have a business or even start an internet business, you can now put up and accept we take Bitcoins. The amount of businesses taking Bitcoins around the world is growing rapidly. We were one of the first companies in Australia to accept Bitcoin in Australia, and but there's more and more companies accepting Bitcoin. Richard Branson came out a few weeks ago and said that Virgin Galactic will accept Bitcoin. It's $250,000 if you got it, or 250 Bitcoins thereabouts, to go into space with it. So there's more and more bigger brands. It was reported recently that a Tesla motor vehicle was purchased by Bitcoin. I think a Lamborghini was just purchased by Bitcoin. You can buy US property. We were one of the first companies in the world to make available where you can buy property in the US particular through Bitcoin. There's now agents selling mansions by Bitcoin. So do people, one of the things that you're going to have, and one of the questions you may have, apart from how do you get your hands on this Bitcoin, is one, what can you do with it? And what is its value? You often hear even the Wall Street Journal reporter there saying it only has the value people place upon it. Is it true? You heard him say that. And this is a common objection you'll hear, or there's always, to create a market, there has to be those that are bullish on it, and there have to be those that are pessimistic on it. Now, the reality in the world is you can always count on people to be pessimistic about anything. Is that true? You don't have to matter whether it's Bitcoin or whatever. Here's the ironic thing. Bitcoin has been the most successful. Jot this down. Bitcoin has been the most successful investment on the history of human civilization to this date. It already has achieved that stat. In 2013, by far, it's the best investment in 2013. To give an example, if you bought, and it's in just this 12 months ago, if you invested $10,000 into Bitcoin, as of a few weeks ago, you would have had $1.25 million. As of today's prices, you'd still have close to $700,000. I'm not sure what other investments out there have produced that. If you had invested in Bitcoin, $10,000 into Bitcoin 3 years ago, you would have a $200 million fortune today. So we're talking about an extraordinary, successful investment. Despite that, still a large majority of people will be pessimistic about it. So the point is, what will ever change some of these people's minds? Will anything ever change their mind, yes or no? No, they're always going to be pessimistic or skeptical or bearish on pretty much anything. Even if you've had one of the most successful investment in the history of the world, of human civilization, they will still be pessimistic. Does that mean there's no opportunity? Well, that's what you've got to look into. We want to look at, be impartial and look at both sides of the picture, those who think it's great, those who don't, and then we can make a judgment as an investor where we fit into that, or whether we just want to be libertarian views and go, you know what, I'm happy to support Bitcoin because I believe that it's done for the right reasons. It's a chance to reshape the world, reshape the monetary system, remove or reduce the power of private central bankers, and put the power back into an open source system that serves people on a fair basis. Does it make sense? And why I share that with you, because you might be going, if you're just a hardcore investor, say, well, Jamie, I don't care about people that have libertarian views and they want to help change the world because, what's that got to do with making money? Well, it has everything to do with making money, because you need to understand why there is, quote, intrinsic value or massive amount of underlying support for Bitcoin. And now, if you don't understand that, there's a lot of people in this world, including myself, that want to see a change and are happy to support and endorse digital currencies to bring about that change. Then if you understand that whether you're a pessimist or not, there's an underlying support for Bitcoin outside of any other aspects it has in real value. Does it make sense? And this is why when there's some journalists will say it's like, or critics will say it's like a tulip mania after the tulip boom that occurred back in whenever that was in the Dutch era, that they're simply wrong. Others will say it's a fad. Well, they're simply wrong. It's been around since 2009. If Bitcoin was simply a fad, would it still be around? Yes or no? It would be gone by now. Bitcoin has been tested so many times, it would be gone by now. So it's not a fad. Is Bitcoin a bubble? Well, we'll address that issue today. That's going to come down to a matter of opinion. I'll happily share my opinion and why I believe in that opinion based on the evidence that I have. It doesn't mean anyone has a crystal ball. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what the price of Bitcoin will be tomorrow, let alone in 6 months or 12 months or 5 years, or whether it'll be around in 5 years. No one knows that. That gives the opportunity. Because we have a market, because we have opposing views. That's what you want. So you want to thank the pessimists or the skeptics or the critics in the world, because they're a very necessary part to create a market. If everyone was bullish, then that's when a bubble can occur. If everyone was bullish, that's when tulip mania can occur. That's when you probably want to be selling. Okay. So the other things we'll look at also today is Google. You can track the Bitcoin is the top 10 most searched items in the world for 2013. And ironically, you could follow, actually one of the handouts that you have there, you can follow a chart. Let's see if we can find that. Actually, it's on the top, I think. If you turn to the second page, it might be, look at the second page of that article. It says, what is Bitcoin? What is Bitcoin? Among the top US Google searches in 2013. Now, if you turn to the second page of that, there is actually a chart. So, if you turn over on the back of the first page, effectively, you'll see that. And what you'll see there is two charts. Now, what you'll find is the top chart is the chart of Google searches. Does it make sense? The bottom chart is the chart of Bitcoin prices. You don't have a copy of that?
No, I don't.
Okay, they'll hand out some more. It's the one that looks like, yep. So now what do you notice about the two charts? Let me ask you, is there a lot of similarities between the two charts, yes or no? Yeah, totally, because what you have is every time the amount of traffic to searching about Bitcoin has surged, so has the price of Bitcoin surged. Does it make sense? It's almost if you could preempt the amount of people searching for Bitcoin in the future and the increased amount of people, then that would suggest to you, as more and more people become aware of Bitcoin, more and more people search online what is Bitcoin, then you would expect a corresponding correlation of the increase and surge in price of Bitcoin. Does it make sense? And that would explain why in the last 6 weeks you've seen Bitcoin become famous, because there was a massive surge in the price, but because there's a massive surge. Now you might say, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? It's a bit of both. there's a surge in price, which leads to a surge in interest of what is Bitcoin and people searching. As more people search and want to focus on Bitcoin, it compounds and creates a surge in price again. And then more people, it's reported about in the mainstream media more, and more people go and search it. So it has that spiraling effect. Okay, so a little bit about the history of that. To give an example, a Norwegian gentleman invested $27 Australian equivalent into Bitcoin some years ago, and it was recently reported he has equivalent of about $4.5 million to this day. The Winklevoss twins, those who've watched the movie Facebook, remember the Winklevoss twins sued Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, claiming that ConnectU, their social media network that Mark was apparently working on, he copied that to create Facebook. Now, whether you agree with them or not, they got a $65 million cash payout and $200 million in what equivalent today of Facebook shares. So they did quite well out of that. But what they did, Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss, is they really believed in Bitcoin, and they were one of the biggest early stage investors. They invested $11 million of their own money into Bitcoin a few short years ago. It's now rumored they have as much as 90,000 Bitcoins, which is a considerable, effectively that would be close to $990 million, today. So we have elected to put our money and faith in a mathematical framework that is free of politics and human error. That's their viewpoint. Once again, you can see one of the reasons what's driving them and many others to invest in Bitcoin is not so much just to be a speculative investor, not so much just to make money, is because they believe, libertarian viewpoint, that it has a future and they want to support that change. Does that make sense? You've got to understand that there's a big driving force behind Bitcoin. Now, you can also say, well, the other big driving force behind Bitcoin was drug dealers and people with, want to remain anonymous. Now, and that's where initially a lot of defamation on Bitcoin to try and discredit it was, well, with Silk Road. Silk Road was shut down in recent months, and Silk Road was one of the biggest traders online of using Bitcoin. Silk Road was an online drug site, basically, where you could buy narcotics and illegal drugs, and people used Bitcoin because there's no way that the authorities could track it. Now, to suggest that that is any blight on Bitcoin is taking it one step further. That would be to suggest that no drug dealers or no drug industries ever used Australian dollar notes or US dollar notes to trade in drugs. We all know that it doesn't matter what form of currency. There's the black market is always going to use a form of currency. So really, it's really irrelevant to. But what a lot of people thought when Silk Road was shut down, that it would the market for Bitcoin would collapse and it would be worthless. Okay. Now, the more you study Bitcoin, the more you'll hear something happens to Bitcoin, now it's going to be worthless. Jot this word down. Bitcoin is incredibly resilient. It's incredibly resilient. So you're going to be an investor. You can start to develop somewhat significant confidence in Bitcoin. It's very resilient. What that means is that when things that should have destroyed it or cause it to crash massively in value happen, even if it does drop in price, it tends to have the ability to bounce back very quickly. So what it also, you could also say to that, the critics might say, but it's also, jot this down, it's also incredibly volatile, which is true. Bitcoin is very volatile. But that's because, say, why is that? Well, because we have two very different opposing views, and because Bitcoin is new, not enough people know, there's not enough fundamentals or enough confidence where enough people know, so it's all over the place. People go, what does that news mean? It can drop, Bitcoin can change price of $200 or $300 a day at the moment in a space of a few short hours. Incredibly volatile for a market that is incredibly liquid. Most things you can get volatile stocks on the stock market, like small penny stocks that might move up and down in price, but there's very little liquidity in it. That's why they move so much. With Bitcoin, you can jot this down. The market cap of Bitcoin is $10 billion right now. So it has about $10 billion worth of liquidity. That's not huge as far as Forex or as far as stocks. That's quite tiny, but it's still liquid. If you wanted to, the point is that when I was using the example of Bartercard before, if you were just to use Bitcoin as a form of barter, the difference with the Bartercard is that can you convert barter dollars to instant cash on an exchange within minutes, yes or no? No. To convert barter to cash, I don't know anywhere who's going to pay you cash for barter dollars. If they do, they'll pay you, 10 cents in the dollar. So the point is, barter has value. So Bitcoin has value as barter as well for businesses and merchants to trade with each other. But what it has is the ability to convert it to cash instantly. So a lot of people that aren't aware of Bitcoin are thinking, is it hard to convert to cash, or how do you get it, and all these things. So that means there's a lot of people that haven't invested in Bitcoin yet, or don't have Bitcoin yet, because these answers, what we're going to answer today, haven't been answered enough to enough people for them to really know, because it's something new. But the reality is, I can say this, that Bitcoin is perhaps one of the fastest ways you can convert something to cash than any form of currency that we have other than cash. Does that make sense? So you can convert Bitcoin very quickly to cash. People will happily buy Bitcoin off you, particularly exchanges, including us. We have an exchange. If you've got Bitcoins you want to sell, we'll pay you cash for Bitcoins. Make sense? It will be one of the first companies in Australia to launch ATMs. So we have some being sent to Australia. So there will be ATM machines where you can go and put cash in if you want to buy Bitcoins, and you'll be able to get Bitcoins. Does that make sense? So they're already been launched in Canada, and they'll be soon here in Australia. So there's a whole industry emerging around Bitcoins. And what will happen is, as these things change, now what we're going to look at today is that mining it. I'm not going to go in my book, I talk about mining it. I'm not going to teach you about mining today. I'll give you my opinion on mining. Later today, Lou's going to cover a little bit of that, but we will give you a detailed copy of the manual. And in that, if you want to learn about mining, you can read that in the manual. But here's my viewpoint on mining Bitcoin today. The horse is bolted. As an individual person that might set up a computer in your garage, you've probably missed the boat on mining. Okay, there's a story of a young guy that set up his home computer in his garage in the United States of America to mine Bitcoin. He forgot about it, come back 3 months later, and he was sitting on $12 million of Bitcoin, which in today's value is worth about $80 million. So those days, that would have been, who would have loved that opportunity? You start something, a strategy, and you forget about it, and you make incredible amounts of money. These are story after story of people that have made incredible money in Bitcoin because they were early stage adopters. So, and since I started talking about it, I started telling clients, some months ago, and of course in my book, that I was bullish on Bitcoin, and it was around $120 in price point. So people that listened then and went and bought Bitcoin, seen it rise as much as $1,250. And I'll talk about my viewpoints. You might say, well, that's all right for them, but now it's risen in value so much, or what's going on in the current market of Bitcoin, where do you see it heading now? And I'll share my views on that for you in this session before lunch. Then what we'll look at, I'm going to go through with you before lunch about how to buy Bitcoin, and I'm going to talk about the different ways you can do this. So jot this down. As far as Bitcoin, as buying it, you're going to either buy and hold strategy. So buy and hold. So some of you here will be looking at, if you don't have Bitcoin yet, might go, once you have enough knowledge about it, go, I'm going to buy Bitcoin purely to hold. Okay, and we'll talk about that. That may be to speculate, to profit from it, or simply as a hedge, another form of gold. We'll talk about that. The other way that we can do is to trade Bitcoin. Because it's very volatile, that is now becoming something that day traders, etc., are moving into this market. Just like you might trade Forex as a currency, you may now want to trade Bitcoin as a currency, as a speculative investment. And if you're able to get in and out with that massive price fluctuations, that Bitcoin channeling, particularly between it's been doing like 600-700 to 1,000 and channeling downwards. I'll give you an example of what we mean by that. Channeling is a strategy I've taught in my home study on stocks for some time, but you can either channel price of the commodity or currency or share can go up and down like that. If it's doing that, let's say this is $600 and this is $900. If it's doing that, that's called channeling up, down, or sideways. Take a guess. Is that channeling up, down, or sideways? Sideways. It's moving in a pattern like that. Now, if you looked at Bitcoin, it's probably channeling on a slight down, at the moment, a downward trend. Okay? So, but what you can see, as you see that channeling, if you want to be a channeler, you can go, well, hang on a minute. Last time it was at 600. People were panicking and thought there's news out, it might go down more or whatever. I'm going to start buying here. And then it went back up, and fairly quickly, when it gets up here, I'm going to sell. When it gets down here, I'm going to buy. When it gets up here, I'm going to sell. You can start to see the profit potential, whether Bitcoin, you might go, I'm going to trade Bitcoin, or I might channel Bitcoin. And I don't care whether Bitcoin ever goes to 10,000 or whatever, because I'm going to profit from it anyhow. So after lunch, I'm going to have one of our traders come in, and he will talk to you. I mean, we're not going to do in-depth, detailed trading seminar today. It's really a bit more general than that, to find out what Bitcoin is, how we can do it. But we're going to have a session on trading, because some of you might go, I want to become a Bitcoin trader. Okay. Others might say, I just want to buy and hold. Others might say, I just want to know what it is, so I can sound very knowledgeable around my friends who are asking about Bitcoin. So that's what we can do there. The other thing, third of all, you may have a business, or you may be starting a business, and you can accept Bitcoins. That's another way to accumulate Bitcoins. You might have a product or service that you have profit margin inbuilt, so you're happy to accept Bitcoin because you've got a profit margin in that, and you know that long-term Bitcoin could be worth a lot more, or you can get it and quickly sell it and convert it to cash. So that's the other way you want to become a merchant, and it's also a good way to get publicity, to grow your business, because by accepting Bitcoin, you tap into a rapidly emerging Bitcoin industry. So as this develops more, at the market for Bitcoin, and more everyday people have Bitcoin, you'll see this will be a real growth factor. And that's what you want to factor in when you're saying, what is the value of Bitcoin? Well, hang on, the average person doesn't have it yet. If that happens, I can give you, jot this down, there's 250,000 e-wallets at this present time, 250,000 accounts open in the world of Bitcoin. That's grown rapidly in the last 6 weeks, but that's still only a small fraction of the world's population that have a Bitcoin wallet. Now there's 250,000 Bitcoin wallets. That doesn't mean there's 250,000 people, there's probably 150,000, because many have multiple wallets. Okay. As a hint, if you're going to have Bitcoins, you should store them in more than one wallet. And you only have one Bitcoin, that might be a bit hard. But as security, it's just like, would you put all your money in one bank account in case that bank account got stolen? You'd say, well, I might have my Bitcoin spread over a couple of different bank accounts or e-wallets. So if I got some stolen, I haven't lost my whole stash, because a particular person had $100 million of Bitcoin stolen recently, and they tried to trace it, and they're never going to see the $100 million again. And that person has to go back and work a job now. So that's a large amount of money to be stolen. So Bitcoin, the critics will say there's some security issues, but then again, there's some security issues with your bank as well. But if someone steals money from your bank, you're protected by the bank to a degree. With Bitcoin, there's no central bank, so if we want to love it where we're outside of central controlled banks or central controlled governments, that's great, but the flip side is there's no one that's going to insure if someone steals it. If someone steals your Bitcoin at the moment, and you go to the police and say, someone stole my Bitcoin, the police are unlikely to help you, because technically it's not a currency yet. It's not an official currency in Australia, in many countries of the world yet. Therefore, it's technically not theft. So don't say, Jamie said it's technically like theft, and go out and steal people's Bitcoin and push the boundaries. But that's the reality, because there is this whole, the police are going to probably go, what the hell is Bitcoin? And you probably, at this point, couldn't be arrested for stealing Bitcoin, because it's not a currency, so it's not an official form of money yet. So these are all the things that have to come into play with something new. Make sense? Okay, so quickly turn the person next to you and teach them in 30 seconds or less, what is Bitcoin, and are you bullish or bearish on Bitcoin? Go for it. So a lot of people move their money to Bitcoins. Why? Because Bitcoins is outside the banking system. It's outside the government system. It's a digital currency. As a result of that, when they say, well, the banks or governments can't take that money. They can't freeze that because it's not an account. It's an algorithm, like a banking number, effectively out of the ecosystem of Bitcoin, which we'll show another video to help you explain that a little bit more if you want to know the technical things. So they can't be frozen. What they would be talking about is Mt. Gox is the exchange. So they may, I don't know exactly, but I have heard of that. It's been hard and slow getting money in and out of Mt. Gox, and that's why a lot of people aren't now trading with Mt. Gox. Bitstamp, we'll talk about the different exchanges today. Or, you know, there's also local exchanges. We have our own exchange as well. So people are just buying and holding. Particularly, it's easier just do it at a local exchange because you can open an account in 2 seconds, and you can transfer money, etc. Or you can use an overseas larger exchange, but then it'll take longer to open. You'll have to verify your bank accounts, and it can be incredibly slow. And Mt. Gox is one that has become, because the authorities have probably restricted people getting their money in and out. So they can't freeze a Bitcoin account, but if people have money sitting with an exchange perhaps, waiting to trade, then they can make it difficult to get the money in and out. But we'll look at that after lunch. We'll have Lou come on and talk to you about how to, at the end of the day, before we wrap up, how do you open up a Bitcoin account, or how do you buy Bitcoin, all those intricate details that people want to know. How do you sell Bitcoin? And some of you already know all that, but just so people at home also here, how to do that. We'll cover all those basic things. I guess with Bitcoin, you need to cover basic things because it is new, and what may appear basic, if no one's ever heard of Bitcoin before, is not actually basic. You need to know that stuff, and that's why you're here today. It's true. We'll take a quick look at this video.
The world is in financial disarray. Currencies failing, economies in wild flux, jobs being lost. But what if you could build an entirely new economy, one specifically designed for the digital realm? Well, that is the dream behind Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a decentralised electronic cash system that uses peer-to-peer networking along with digital signatures and cryptographics to generate currency. Now, with traditional money, think dollars, the euro, pesos, you've got a central bank, like the Federal Reserve. They issue the currency and they print more or less cash as needed, but not with Bitcoin. Bitcoins are generated using a process called mining. Your computer is given a complex mathematical problem to solve, and the goal is a 64-digit number. If your grey box can successfully solve that algorithm, then congratulations, you are the proud owner of a new block of 50 Bitcoins. The network automatically adjusts the difficulty of mining so that 50 Bitcoins are created roughly every 10 minutes. The reason they call it mining is because there's a set number of Bitcoins that can ever be mined in the system. There's only 21 million Bitcoins that will ever be created in total. You can't just print off cash like they do in the real world. You're digging it out of the system like precious metals from some mathematical mine. Right now, a Bitcoin is roughly worth $70 US. Last year, miners generated the equivalent of $16.7 million worth of Bitcoins, and we're only halfway down the mine shaft with over 10 million Bitcoins unearthed already. Like any economy, you don't want too much too fast because then the value of your currency drops, or so slow that your economy grounds to a halt. It's designed to be a self-stabilising economy. Whether it actually is that way though, well, that is a little bit more complicated. Welcome to the exchanges. These exchanges allow people to buy and sell Bitcoins with each other. The largest Bitcoin exchange is Mt. Gox. And it's here that you can purchase Bitcoins using local currencies. You can even store Bitcoins too. Mind you, that can be a bit risky. Hackers have, on occasion, dangerously destabilised these exchanges. Bitcoin is also the currency that fuels what's known as the dark web. Using software called Tor, you can hide your identity online and access the digital marketplace they call the Silk Road, where sellers flog illegal drugs like LSD, heroin and marijuana. Buyers conduct all transactions using Bitcoin. The influence of Bitcoin is growing. WikiLeaks and WordPress will accept Bitcoin as cash. Even the ideas behind Bitcoin are already changing the way people think about cash. The Royal Canadian Mint have just launched MintChip, an electronic currency backed by the Canadian government that borrows a lot from the philosophy of Bitcoin. And ultimately, that is what's most powerful about Bitcoin. Not the coins itself, but the way it can change the way we look at, think about, and most importantly, spend our money.